Hey everyone, I'm back with a news video. Going to be coming out with some videos in August and leading into September. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you hit that subscribe button. If you're new, hit that like button. Comment your thoughts down below. Nick Robertson and the Toronto Maple Leafs agree on a one-year deal. There's also other RFA news, other kind of topics I want to go over in this video. So I hope you stick to the end. And of course, give your thoughts on the Robertson deal. It's 1.825 for Robertson for 1 year. If you look at what Elliot Friedman reported on going back a few days ago, it was Robertson's team at 2.25 and the Toronto Maple Leafs at 1.2. So essentially they meet in the middle here. For a guy that scored 15 goals last year, but at the other side of things, missed most of the playoff games, not by like his choice or health status. The Toronto Maple Leafs just chose not to play him. So there's two ways to look at this. I do think it is rare to see a guy that's like 23, still developing, score 15 goals, and you kind of give up on him. I don't think the Leafs have ever been at a point where they're like, hey, Robertson doesn't have the potential. It's just been fit. And also, can this guy stay healthy and be disciplined? Because it's also been a conversation of him not playing good defensive hockey or also some dumb penalties, which we saw in the playoffs. So kind of what I've been looking at, just some tweets out there, good regular season depth. Willie Stein also talks about, I've looked at it too, like the size of Michelli, Domi, Robertson. You also look at like how Yarncrow really doesn't move the needle. You have a lot of those like undersized guys or guys that just don't play that style that you're trying to move towards. I mean, they just acquired guys like Nick Waugh, Dakota Joshua, of course, Scott Lawton before the deadline, which we want to see more from him going into the next season. You're trying to fit a new style. I think Michelli's going to fit that playmaking ability that was lost with Marner, and then Domi as well. Like some people talk about Domi being expendable. Are you crazy? Go look at the guys that have scored big Game 7 goals or big contributing goals, not even just with the Leafs. Look at Domi, whether it was Carolina or what we saw from him prior in the playoffs. Max Domi's a playoff player. You need those guys if you are the Toronto Maple Leafs. So stop talking about Max Domi being expendable, especially at his cap hit. Domi and Michelli combined being at around $7 million for the kind of playmaking they're going to put up this season. Relax. Nick Robertson at 1.825, you need at least 15 goals from him to make it worth it to keep him in the lineup, but then the playoffs are a whole different conversation. So Nick Robertson from JFresh here, signed 1 times 1.825, is a skilled scoring winger who takes a lot of one-timers but has struggled to get anything other than sheltered depth minutes. So power play time, does he get more power play time with Marner out of the equation? I think you give it to him. I think there's a scenario where you balance the two power plays, especially with Marner gone. Maybe it means one power play has Matthews and Matthew Nyes, and then you have John Tavares and William Nylander on that other unit. So just throwing something into the wind here. Maybe it's a scenario where you have Austin Matthews, Matthew Nyes, Max Domi, Nick Robertson, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson on one power play. Fill out the rest. The second power play unit, something along the lines of John Tavares, William Nylander, Michelli, things like. I think that's kind of my mentality. Just balance out the power play, see how it works. You could stack it and still have a really good power play, right? Like even with Marner not in the equation, Matthew Nyes is the net front. Then you have Tavares, Nylander, Matthews, and then pick your poison between Riley and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. It's still a stacked unit regardless, even with no Mitch Marner. The only conversation I would have is, where's your playmaking coming from? Maybe it just means the Leafs are shooting more on the power play, which at the same time was kind of an issue last year. They weren't putting pucks into that area as much. It was a lot of perimeter passing. So maybe that's a conversation to have. Hey, we'll stack the unit and Marner's not doing more of his perimeter passing. We just get pucks to the net and get Matthew Nyes and John Tavares to have what is their strength, which is in tight plays in around that net. One conversation I want to have is, if you don't keep Nick Robertson, if you were still to flip him, what are the next moves for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Could you flip Nick Robertson, or are you flipping a guy like Max Domi or Bobby McMann? I do think they want to play that certain style. You have Dakota Joshua, you have Stevie Lorentz, you have that size in the bottom six. So does that mean one of Robertson, Domi, or McMann are still going to get flipped? Well, the conversation for me is you're looking at dumping one of Cam for Yarncrow. You're not going to go into next season with both those guys. I think you should try to flip both of them, essentially. So Nashville's a team that I think they're kind of trying to figure out what they are. And I think Cal Yarncrow, a reunion, attach him with Nick Robertson. Robertson scored 15 goals. Luke Evangelista, who's still an RFA right now, just didn't have the ARB rights, didn't have the same scenario. Maybe he's a guy that could be a potential for the Toronto Maple Leafs on that right wing. He has 10 goals, 20-something assists last season, so not quite the goal scoring. But I think it's a scenario for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe you do flip Robertson. Maybe it's not now. Maybe it's in the season, but there have been conversations that Brad Treliving is going to sneak in right here in August and make a trade when we're not expecting it. Maybe on a Friday night like he's done in the past. So I do look at a potential lineup. Even if it's not Evangelista, maybe it's Nick Robertson in this spot. Maybe you give Robertson finally that opportunity to play in the top line. So just ignore that top line for a second. And if it's Michelli, Tavares, and Nylander, the bottom six, McMahon, Waugh, Domi, Lorentz, Lott, and Joshua, that's a better bottom six than we've seen for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And having extra forwards, it would be Kampf and Yarncrow in that scenario, and then the defense group, Henry Thrun as your seventh defenseman. And then you have Phil Myers also as an eighth defenseman. So it's pretty cool to see finally the Leafs have like 8 NHL caliber defensemen, and there's no debate about that. I do think there's a conversation that maybe you still look at trading one of your defensemen between Carlo and Ekman Larson for a forward upgrade. I don't think that's like a far-fetched thing. I don't even think that's a hot take anymore. I made that a hot take kind of at the start of this offseason, and now people have looked at it and go, okay, well, the Leafs actually don't really need to touch their defense group, and it's kind of one of their strengths. Maybe, just maybe, you consider moving one of those guys to upgrade your forward group. But I don't think any Leaf fan would be complaining if you go back into this new season with this defense group. I know there's been the Morgan Riley criticism. 7.5 with a rising cap for a guy that can put 40 to 50 points. If Riley can do that, that's an offensive perspective. Look around the league. I know it's very easy to look into Leafland, but look around the league. That is what that pays. In around 5, 6, 7 million with a rising cap, if you can put 40, 50 points in the back end, that's what you're hoping for from Morgan Riley. Is it maybe a dream to say, hey, you want that number one defenseman? Yeah, they don't grow on trees, but ideally you're probably wanting an upgrade on that top pair. But at the same time, it's a solid top four. It's better than a lot of top fours out there. Just to go through some NHL news, just on top of this, again, Leafs next moves, maybe they still flip Nick Robertson. I would not be surprised if it's one of those middle six forwards that go, and maybe it's a package with one of the Leafs defense to upgrade in the forward group. I still think Brad Treliving, from what I've heard, from what I've kind of just felt on the situation, I still think Brad Treliving has one big trade up his sleeve, whether it's sometime in August or as he evaluates things going into training camp, making a move then once he sees how kind of the roster is settling in. So just looking at some stuff, Alex Laferriere from the Kings signs a 3-year deal, $4.1 million. Canada's roster, or at least orientation camp for the roster for the Olympics, got released. I don't think there was any huge shocks. Like I thought that the goaltending situation was a little bit of a surprise for me. For the Leafs' perspective, John Tavares gets invited. I don't think the defense was a shocker either. But the goaltending for me, like I thought Logan Thompson, I thought maybe Mackenzie Blackwood. I know there's been that off-ice conversation of Thompson and Hill having beef. I just think that's silly. But anyways, I thought there would be maybe an extra goalie being invited. But it seems like maybe they're just going to run it back with the same 3 goalies. And then, of course, the Nick Robertson conversation. Devin Levi signed a 2-year deal. And then Pospisil and Dylan Samberg, 2 underrated players. I thought they got a lot. And I thought Samberg, if he was going to get that kind of money, it was going to be long-term. Anyways, guys, give me your thoughts on a lot of these conversations. One thing I actually didn't bring up here, Quinn talked about maybe flipping Bobby McMahon. I've had a lot of Leaf fans kind of talk to me about how McMahon just didn't live up to the hype, I guess, for what he's done this season to the playoffs. And that's been a trend for Leaf players is you put up certain numbers in the season and then you just don't have that going for you in the playoffs. That's why it's just so frustrating to hear some people or see some people talking about how Domi's expendable. There are some players that play well in the season. There's some players that step up in big moments in the playoffs. You know what? I do understand the perspective that Max Domi was a bit of a defensive liability at sometimes in the playoffs, but he also made some good plays defensively as well. And I think it's a guy that sticks up for his teammates, a guy that has that passion, and it's not a ridiculous cap hit. When you're talking about anywhere from like a $2 to $3 million cap hit, and you're complaining about that guy who's scoring big goals in big moments, and then David Kampf and Cal Yarncrow combined make more than that, and they're doing nothing in that regard, let's just appreciate those perspectives, okay? There's always going to be different type of players in a roster. You need the type of players that are not going to shy away from scoring the big goals in big games and in overtimes and game sevens, all that stuff. So I think that's what Max Domi brings to the table. So give me your thoughts, guys, on what you think could be next moves. Again, very much so I could see the lineup just sticking the same, like going into the new season, like Domi, Matthews, nice. Michelli, Tavares, Nylander. Waugh, McMahon, whoever you want to put on that other wing. Maybe it's Dakota Joshua. Maybe it's Lawton. I do think Lawton might stay at the center spot with like Lorentz, and maybe it's Yarncrow to start the season. But then David Kampf at over a $2 million cap hit is potentially a healthy scratch to open the season. So that's interesting. And then Nick Robertson, who you just signed to a $1.825 million cap hit, is he a healthy scratch to start the season? So I think the Leafs still need to move out 2 forwards, and maybe it's a scenario where you're upgrading for a forward to go into the top 6. As I said, give me your thoughts. Subscribe, like, comment, notification bell. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.